Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you, Dr. Newton.
No worries. May I ask you please to tell us your name?
Sure. My name is Germar Reed.
Okay, and we share a little bit about yourself, anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure thing. So I'm originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Spent about almost 10 years in North Carolina,
Okay.
between the Marine Corps and I attended East Carolina University. I've been in the data science and analytics field since graduating undergrad at East Carolina in '05, so about 15 years, and continued to do that work after attending grad school back home in Michigan at Wayne State in Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, so I guess that's a little bit about the work, what I've been doing, career related, and then also with school. I'm also outside of work. Being a data analyst, I'm naturally a curious person, so I'm a huge history nerd. I love to dig into how people came to be where they're at. Why, especially with the Midwest with migration, how folks migrated from North Carolina, from Mississippi, and a lot of people in the Michigan area, how we came to be in that area. Yeah.
Excellent. That's very, very, very wonderful information. First, let me declare I am also a pirate. That's where I got my doctorate degree. So there's that. And then I think I used to think I was the only person in America who read as much American history as I have. I don't read outside of American history, but I guess maybe once I get all the American history down, I might move to another country, couple countries or continents, but we have that in common. And we also share the field of IT. So let me ask you, how did you end up in the Marines? What led you there, and how long were you there? And how would you classify or categorize your time in the military?
Oh, sure thing. So both of my grandparents, both my maternal and paternal grandfathers were in the military. My paternal grandfather in the Navy and my maternal grandfather in the Marine Corps, both having served in the Korean War and shortly after World War II. But then also, in addition to that, after being in the Marine Corps, I was able to trace back, through my family on both sides, folks that had been in the military going back to the Civil War, and we're still working on digging up some of the information before that. So yeah, so that's how. And I guess to answer your question, I guess maybe I did not answer it, but I joined the Marine Corps because traditionally the men in my family used that as a means of either going into work afterwards, or sorry, I lost screen there. Either going into work afterwards, or going to college using the GI Bill. So both my grandfathers used the GI Bill to attend university. Yeah. Okay, I'm back. Yeah.
Excellent. So whatever that nonsense is, something just flashed on my screen. I don't know what that was, but okay. So how long were you in the Marines?
Yeah. So I did 4 years. I did one enlistment. Was stationed based out of Eastern North Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina, but spent most of my time in South America. So I was attached to a detachment of Marines that supported embassies throughout Latin America. So, and maybe I should say South America, but it included Central America and some parts of the Caribbean as well.
Okay. Did you serve any war or have any military combat? Was that ever something that you encountered during your time in the military?
No declared combat, but of course there were conflicts going on during the time in South America during the time that I was there, but no declared wars.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. No combat, right? No,
right.
The sadness of that. So let me ask you this. So you went to East Carolina and you got your degree in data and analytics. So how do
So,
you use that today? So how does that manifest? Do you work in that career, or tell me a little bit about that?
sure thing. So I started out in actually in marketing. And so I started my career in marketing, and while supporting a back home in Michigan, I was working for a small credit union,
Mhm,
and we had to downsize because I went back to Michigan during the time when the auto industry started to take its dip,
mhm,
and we had to actually we actually lost one of the consulting firms that we had employed,
mhm.
and but the reporting and the analytics still had to go on. So I took up that work and found that I was very interested in understanding, why customers were interested in purchasing a certain product. And I was in the financial, I was support at a credit union, so purchasing or utilizing financial products, understanding what drove folks to make financial decisions. And that's where I first was introduced into data analytics. So from there, I went and I furthered my education with a concentration in data science and analytics. Yep.
Excellent.
So I absolutely love the work that I do. I love not only understanding why, I guess, large groups of consumers make purchases, but understanding, the different segments and how we purchase based on, what segments we belong to. So, yeah.
Excellent. So what are your thoughts about emerging technologies such as algorithms and these I could name all of them, but like algorithms and artificial intelligence, machine learning, biometrics. What are your thoughts about that in terms of how it resonates in your career?
Sure. So you know what? I'm definitely a technologist. So I believe in technology, but I also understand that people write code. People write the code that is being used in artificial intelligence, in advanced analytics, in data analysis. So our biases are going to be embedded in that code so I think that it's while I definitely I'm definitely a fan of using technology, but I'm also cautious of, I think that it's important that we have all voices right in the room when that code is written, when that code is reviewed, because like I said, we have those biases when we're writing those codes, or when we're analyzing that data, because I mean, you can, and I often hear this, you can almost make data say what it is that you want to.
Absolutely.
You can use it to make your point, or you can use it to defend your point. So I think that, so one thing I often, when I'm hiring, I'm pretty upfront about the fact that I need diversity of thought in the room and on the projects that we're working on. So,
Amen. Yeah. Amen. So one of the things that you said that really hit the nail on the head for me, but I want to just push back a little bit. So
sure.
when you think about these just current technology, we don't have to jump forward to the 21st century. We can just stay in the 20th century. So such simple things as writing a program to check retail sales, or
Right.
creating data saving to the cloud, and all of these video conferencing tools that we have now, such as this wonderful Zoom app we're using right now. But I mean, all of these things have had their moments, right? And so
Yep.
I'll ask you this question and see if you remember this. In 2015, Google came out with their facial recognition software,
Yes.
and it was a blunder of massive proportions, right? So
Yes.
as you said, being in the room, matters, but I don't know who was in the room, but I can only assume that everybody in that room who was developing that code and testing that code were not of color, of any kind of color.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when the software was released, big hit, it worked, it did what it said it was supposed to do, except when it came to Black and brown, yellow and red people. And I do not use the word people of color because I don't know what that means, because hell, all of us
I
are
agree
color.
with you.
Everybody's of
Yep.
color. So what color are we talking about here? So but Black and brown and red and yellow communities. And so
Yep.
when they encountered those communities, it put up a picture of a gorilla. And there was a lot of noise about it, right? So TED Talk had this young woman talking about it. It was all in you couldn't read a technology magazine without reading about it. And so then we got to more information about diversity. And I would just say your diversity of thoughts, mine a diversity of actions, ideas, persons, and thoughts. You need all four of them to have diversity. You can't just hire a black or brown or red or yellow person to say I'm diverse. Or you can't just hire a woman
Right.
or someone in the LGBTQ community. You have to really think through this, right? So
Right.
the response that people said and had was that it was a failure of the algorithm that was presenting the gorilla, right? So, and of course, biometrics. It's the one piece of emerging technologies that's frightening to me, because
Yeah.
you know I tell a lot of people, so I write on this, I speak on this, I do everything. So there's a company called a group called All Things Open. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they only deal with open source code, and they have a massive conference every year in October. And I mean, like every Fortune 500 company, anybody is there. And so for the last 4 years, I've spoken at that conference. And so this past year, I spoke about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And when I set my title in my proposal, I got a question mark, right? So we're a technology company. Why are we talking about a factory, right? But there was something in that factory that movie that was so important to me. I think it needed to be said. So have you ever seen the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
I have.
So you remember Mr. Buckets?
I do. Mm-hmm.
He's the sole provider for a family of 6 or 7, him and his wife, his 4 grandparents, and his child. So that's the family, right? And so Mr. Bucket loses his job as the factory owner sees his secrets going out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And the feel-good part of the movie is Mr. Bucket gets his job back, replacing the machine that automated his role.
Mm.
And when you think about that, just in a very small way,
right,
it turned out well for Mr. Bucket. But in reality, that's not how it works, because nothing in that movie said Mr. Bucket went to school and got additional training to learn how to fix this machine. There's nothing in this movie that talks about the process from losing his job to getting his job back. And especially for Black and brown and yellow and red people, these automations are coming in a vast way. And if you weren't certain about it before, COVID has made it absolutely front and center.
Absolutely.
Because if these companies had automated earlier, especially the big ones, they would not have lost their economic status. So you can expect, emerging technologies to even become more, available and out there than before. And who are the communities most likely to be disrupted by that? You know the answer to that, right? So
our communities, yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about data analytics, but I hate about data analytics is data. And so let me give you my example. So you have a Facebook account?
I do.
You have a Twitter account?
I do.
You have a LinkedIn account? I know you do that. You have an Instagram? And I can just keep going.
All of it,
And what's the salient point of that? They're all free. So what are you giving up to get those? What are you giving to get those? So Mr. Data and Analytics, please explain that to us.
Yeah, so the exchange is your information, your data. So it's interesting because, and I apologize, I'm in the city, so there may be some fire trucks there. But it's interesting. There's a sister that just launched a company that allows you to sell back your data. But if you think about that, when you think about, I'm trying to think of, you hear folks talk about knowing your worth.
Yeah.
If people understood what the value of their data was, they wouldn't give it away. And It's interesting. I use all of those tools, understanding that, but I freely give that. You and I and everyone else, we freely give that information up. Very valuable data. And I forgot to mention that I actually work for General Motors, and what I was brought in to do was to help General Motors monetize their data. So it's not just they're selling vehicles anymore, but they're selling data back to organizations that would love to use that information to understand how you travel to and from work, how what advertising you listen to, on your way to work that might entice you to pull over and purchase a burger. So there are burger companies that would love to understand, if we're testing 3 or 4 ads and we know exactly when you're hearing that ad, we know where you're positioned when you hear that ad, which one of those ads would motivate you to pull in and purchase the burger that I'm trying to sell. So it's interesting. I'm in monetizing data, and that's so the point that you present is interesting to me, and definitely something I give a lot of thought to. So yeah.
Well, I would just tell you, I don't freely give mine away. I'm being confused and contention with them all the time. So I do not have a Facebook account. I do not. Well, somebody might have created one for me a long time ago. I do not log on to Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I only have Twitter because it feeds my LinkedIn, and conversely, they go back and forth. But what, and I'm sure you're aware, so the 2016 election was an amazing milestone, specifically for those users who use Facebook. But I could go back much longer than that. So the American Heart Association, the Cancer Society, and all of these things were buying data from Facebook based on postings that people put. So if someone said, my mother's in the hospital dying of cancer, it would collect that data, whatever demographics it knew about that person, and then sell it to things. And so the term in the industry became data brokers, right? These are the people who work for these big companies to collect that data and then sell it to whoever it is. And so while Facebook, this price of their stock and where they are is massive, right? But the way they got there is not because we as people who have Facebook accounts are buying things but because they're collecting and massaging data and then selling it off to someone else, which is what makes them a highly profitable company. And what we don't realize, and so I'll just tell you, so I have a little small Rochelle company, and my work is diversity and branding. So I work for individuals to develop their brand, and I tell almost every person I know under the age of 25 to delete their Facebook account, their Twitter account, their Instagram, and whatever else, just nonsense, and only have your LinkedIn account and work your LinkedIn account, especially if you're new in your career. Because as a hiring manager, I go look at what you put out there to see who you are, because if there's some chance that you are, a liability for my company, I need to know who I'm hiring. But other than that, though, so your data, so simply like the conversation you and I started out, what is your name? So you have an unusual name, but there may be a chance there's another Germar Reed out there somewhere. It's a chance. But my name is Rochelle Newton. I can't tell you how many of them exist. I mean, like hundreds. So if someone is doing a data grab, they come across Rochelle Newton in Michigan and assume it's the Rochelle Newton that is in North Carolina. So the way the data is massaged and kind of chopped up into little pieces, understanding how that data is easily applying to you negatively or positively. And we are not, as a society, and I'm specifically talking about communities like me, that are not aware of what's really happening behind the scenes. We don't really understand this as a simple way for companies to get more information so they can sell, manage, decide, alter, whatever it is, something to this community, right? And I'll give you one more example. So if you live in a high risk area, so there's lots of crime, police presence, there's low income, whatever it is. That algorithm, that credit company is, so you're going to go get a loan from the bank to buy a house in your neighborhood. That algorithm is going to assess a value to each one of those things. And it's more than just those, but a value to each one of those things. And then based on that, you will get, I won't say a credit rating, but you will get a profile that says, you could buy this, but you're going to buy it at a higher rate. It's going to cost you more. Right. Whereas if you live in a neighborhood where the police only comes when the house is on fire or somebody has a heart attack or something like that, good income and all that stuff. And people don't understand that, because if you trace back to our early history, financial decisions were made by people. You'd have somebody sitting across the table from you, you take their information, they may or may not do the credit check and see what your credit score is, but that was it. Now, that's so unlikely to be the case unless it's a really, really small bank that they're going to use these kinds of tools. So how do you, in your role as a data analytics person, look at that, and how do you warn or kind of insulate yourself so that you're not vulnerable to these cherry picking data brokers?
Right. So in my area, for me, it's important that we have more. And I'm just going to say, and I speak specifically. We have more Black and brown folks, more Native American, more indigenous people in the room when these decisions are made. Because even when we're building these models that are automated and they're like these models recorrect themselves in that code, and when I not to get too technical, but I sit in the room when the decision is made about which attributes we will keep in that model and which attributes we will discard, and how we will weight those attributes. So if for instance, if we're looking at zip code and we're thinking about how to assign credit to a household, if we're not in the room, there will be greater weight applied to the zip code.
Absolutely.
If there's no one, and I'll even go further. It's not just important that there are Black folks in the room, but there are Black folks in the room that will push and ask the question.
Right.
How do we make sure that this is not excluding folks that should not be excluded?
Right.
And so I think, so for me, the important thing is making sure that there are people in the room when those decisions are made. And throughout my career, I've only been in my career 15 years. I'm often the only person in the room.
We all are there. We all are there. When you go to a conference, very few of you look like you. So
that's right.
It's amazing that you are there, but tell me how being there gets the results that you just spoke of.
Right. You know what? So I push back. I ask the question, like when you're looking at that model and you look at a sample of the output, does that sample of the output look like America? Does it look like the area in which you're targeting? Do we look at who would when we score those households, say 1 through 10, when we look at Black households, are there Black households in those top deciles, in the top percentages of that scoring model? Mm-hmm. I ask that question. I immediately, and I mean, just being honest, being interested, I immediately look to make sure and see what the representation looks like in those. And it's not just whether you're deciding who gets a vehicle at or like in my situation, who gets a vehicle at a certain rate or who gets a mortgage at a certain rate, but across all areas, even when you're thinking about when we're marketing retail products, is there someone in the room that's there to ask that question and to push back? And I'll say that, for the most part, they're not. And I think it starts with, I'm going to be honest, I think it starts with who you're bringing into your organization. Once you get them into the organization, is there a mechanism for encouraging them to stay?
Yep.
Is there a mechanism that allows them to speak up?
Yeah.
And not worry about not being promoted or being frozen out or being walked to the door.
Yeah.
So I think that's the important thing. I'll tell you, in most places that I've been, I'm one of those that I just being honest, I don't stick to an organization for a long time because I see myself. I often joke with my friends and my colleagues. I see myself as a mercenary. I'm there. I have something to offer. The organization has something to offer. We don't owe each other anything past that. Yeah. And I know that a lot of folks don't see it that way. There are a lot of I'll say even growing up in the Midwest, one big thing was being loyal to the organization in which you work for. And I think that, you know, the generation behind my generation is understanding that you know, the loyalty is there's an understanding. I have something to offer, you have something to offer. We work together as long as it's beneficial for both of us. So yeah, so I think that all of those things need to be in place. We need to make sure we're hiring we're hiring folks from different areas. So and I'm going to be specific and say we're hiring Black folk, we're hiring women, we're hiring people that will push back and ask those questions, and then we're supporting them. And I'm going to say this last piece here. The thing that in each of the organizations I've worked for, we bring the folks in, but then there aren't people high enough in the organization and able to say they're just asking the questions that need to be asked. You know, we're trying to sell a product, and we want to make sure that we sell that product. We're equal in the way in which we present, you know, our offering to our customers, to the folks that spend money with us. So hopefully I answered your question.
You did, but I want to go in and tackle a couple of those things. I want to talk about loyalty. So, and I can use myself as an example. I went to my employer in 2008. They called me out of the blue, you know, had no relationship. I hadn't applied for a job, and they called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we need you to come in and fix a problem. I'm going to hire you for 6 months, and then you can go back on and do whatever you were doing before." So I went in, fixed the problem, did some amazing things. After the end of 6 months, they said, "Hey, we want you to come work for us." Great. We're going to pay you X. Great. So July 14th, 2020, pandemic is raging like all get out. Right. I get a 10-minute Zoom call from the head of HR in my department and another manager in that department. And that person says, just like this, "We are eliminating your position. You have 60 days to find a job, and we will pay you however many years of service you've been here in weeks of severance." Exactly like that. And literally said, "If you have any questions, someone will be in touch with you." Click. And, you know, ended the Zoom call. And I had been, so I was smart like you were when I was younger. I used to change job every 2 years so I could get paid more. That's why I was just trying to, you know, chase the dollar. That's what I was doing, chasing the dollar. But then as I got older, you know, when senility set in, you know, I became more dormant. You know, I didn't want to risk. I didn't want to go out and step out there and new thing. And, you know, lots of people had offered me jobs, calls, and I was like, nah, you know, it's a great area to live in. You know, I enjoy the people I work with, you know, no. Yep. Loyalty is, as my brother-in-law always says to me, if it ain't about dollars, it does not make sense. And loyalty is one of those places where that you cannot, companies are not loyal to you. You know, they will give you great benefits, you know, they will pay you whatever they're going to pay you. But at any minute they could wake up and say, "Well, no, I don't think this is working out anymore." You know, and I don't know about where you are, but North Carolina is a right to work state. So they don't even need to have a reason. Just wake up on the wrong side of bed, get out, you know. And then the other thing, you know, that you said that really, so what you said really is where my passion and where my work on the side is, you know. So when I created my company, it's called NASIC. It's Newton Advocacy and Strategic IT Consulting. And it's got nothing to do with IT in the most basic way. It's about what you just said, bringing in the right people in the room so that you are thinking about why you need Black, brown, yellow, red, male, female, sexual orientation to be in the room. It's not, we're not going to tell you how to do your IT. We're not going to tell you about data analytics. That's not what we do. We want to make sure that you hire people that will ensure your outcomes have the best outcome and most productive for your company, but also best outcomes from those people that you hire. Because if you don't engage your employees, and more than just giving them their paycheck, whatever day they get paid, you know, giving them a performance review once a year, you know, and patting them on the head and say, "Go over there and lie down somewhere," these people are not going to be committed and dedicated and giving you everything they got. And so one thing I will note, so I went to a training, a professional development training, and I remember hearing the speaker say that in a company of 100% employment, it's only 12% of that company that does the work. 12%. 33% of those people do whatever's necessary to do in their 8 hours. And then there's 50% does nothing. They go in their office, they move the paper from this side to this side, you know, they go to breaks, they go to the bathroom, you know, they go chit chat with somebody. Now, I mean, if you think about economically, that's absurd, you know, that you have 12% of your organization that's really doing the work. You got 33% that's falling behind them that's coming in somewhere. And then you've got 55% of them that are doing none of that, you know, none of that.
Wow.
And so, and the fact that we don't think it's necessary to have diversity in a way that's not about, you know, you want to feel good, you hire a Black diversity officer. Check that box. Or you hire a diversity officer. Check that box. That's nothing. It means nothing if you hire a diversity officer and you don't empower that diversity officer. So if an employee comes to the diversity officer and says, somebody said the N word to me, and you said, well, we're going to have to investigate. Okay, you go investigate. Well, we can't concretely prove that. Okay, so that's one of them things where the employee who reported this is now moved a little further away from your organization, and they're moving forward and forward. And the other piece I will say to this, and this is the thing that I do for individuals, I created something called a branding box, right? So what's your 3-minute elevator speech? How do you see yourself? Are you an icon? You see yourself just as Apple is an icon? Are you Rochelle Newton an icon? And if the answer to that question is no, you need to make that so. Because when we go in for an interview, we're so nervous and hoping to get a job, we take anything. Where you need to push back. Just what you said. I'm bringing something to you and you're bringing something to me. We are on equal footing. So there's nothing about you that's encouraging me to take this job unless you have something that's of value to me, i.e. you're going to pay me, you're going to give me stock, you're going to give me a bonus, you know, I get a company car, whatever the thing is that matters. But you don't go in there just with your finger, I hope I get this job. No, you go in there, let's negotiate what we're going to take for you, for me to accept you as my business, my organization I want to work for. Because if you want my best, you've got to give me your best. You know, what is that old saying? You got to bring your A game. You got to bring, I'm going to bring mine, you bring yours. And if you ain't got your A game, and I would say most corporations, most universities, most anything out there never bring their A game to their employees. They may bring it to that C-suite level, but the ones that they don't bring their A game. They do not. They, whatever they can do, bare minimum. Okay, I'm done terrorizing you. Okay, I'm
No. I agree with what you're saying 100%.
Yeah, that's why I started my company, because I can't tell you how many people would struggle. You know, I'm going in for an interview with such and such and such. You know, what do I need to do? And so the first thing I ask is, I said, did you read the job description? Yes. How many of the bullets in that job description match your experience or what you feel comfortable you can do? And majority of them don't know. So then the next thing is negotiating, right? So if they're willing to, and I would say a lot of companies pay in the middle. So if they've got a range, so the job is $10 to $100, they probably find somewhere in the middle to pay, you know. And if you accept that, believe me, from that point on, you are going to get minuscule raises, you know, indefinitely. So you need to go in there and very first day, when you accept that job, it needs to be a clear, this is the salary I will take to accept this job. And if I don't get that salary, then this isn't going to work for us. So we're going to need to let that go. You know, so there's that. But the thing that's really more concerning to me than all of that is this sense of, do I really know what I want? You know, do I really want to be a data analytics person? Do I want to be a web designer? Do I want to be the president of the company? You know, and so because you're unsure, when you present yourself, it doesn't come across that you're president material, or it doesn't come across that you're a web designer. Now, if you've been, you know, you can write in C++ and Python and whatever it is, you can write in all those languages, you probably have a better chance, but you also are going to get that marginal treatment from that organization, because once they got you, they got you. So I want to ask you, so where do you see the role of data analytics? And I'm going to throw another one at you. I don't know how familiar you are with law, but e-discovery. And e-discovery is the evidence. So like it used to be when you had a court case against you, or someone had a court case against them, you know, the defense had some evidence and the prosecution had some evidence, or if it's a civil matter, This group had some and that some. If it's a corporate matter, everybody has some, right? And that is usually pieces of paper, right? Just tons of pieces of paper. Well, a few years ago, they came up with something called e-discovery. And basically it's that the data, the papers that they used to have are now digital data documents, right? And so understanding how to do it. And the same concepts of algorithms and AI exist in that as well. So it does. So let's just say somebody copyrighted something that Apple has sold or Microsoft has sold, so they go and find all the sources where they can substantiate that or insubstantiate it one way or the other. So they kind of find out the way that is. So in your role as a data analytics guru, do you then think that we are ready? And when I say ready, meaning mentally, emotionally, economically, everywhere, ready for complete automation in data management, data projecting, all of the things that data can do. So, everybody right now is collecting data. You hear big data and you got Hadoop and all these other programs out here. You hear all the stuff out there.
That's right.
But are we ready to actually take ownership of that data and then give that data not only to the employers, but almost like what you said, I think what you said earlier, which is you then buy back your data. So so for example, like you own your credit report, but you don't have your own credit report. So is there a way, do you see that there's a way that people can actually own and control their data without being a part of a larger conglomerate of things? If what I'm asking makes sense, right? So you got your data at Facebook, you got data at bank, you can go all the places with your healthcare, you got all that data. Where is it concentrated for the individual where he or she can control what's out there? And then, because I'm sure you've seen, you listen, don't sell my data. There's a little box that come here, don't sell my data. Is there a way to bring all of your own data, your own person, your own life, your own experiences, and own that, and then make companies recognize that this is not something that they can just ad hocly apply to something they're doing? And for example, if you take like fast food restaurants, so a better grocery store, so you get the little key card, or you have a number, you key it in, and so they collect data about what you buy. So if you buy chocolate candy every time, you're going to start seeing more ads from that company for you for chocolate candy or whatever it is that you may get. So is there a way to collapse that into something that the individual can own?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna speak as a consumer and not as an analyst.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say that California and Europe is doing something amazing in this area. And it's my understanding and my belief that this is going to spread from California to other states. It's and I'm going to try to. I know the acronym. It's CCPA. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the California Consumer Protection Agency. What it is they can act in California.
Protection Act. That's right.
Yes. So what it is, and I experience that in the work that I do. If a customer from California reaches out and they inform us, they say, please remove my data, or what they will say is you don't have the right to sell my data, to market to me or sell my data.
Right.
And I can tell you without going into too much detail, once we receive that request, everything ends. So you still have the product that you purchased with us. You still have it, and when I say us, I'm saying with other organizations as well. Because I recently moved over from another organization, same situation, and they're doing that in Europe, and they're doing it in California. And it is my belief that, especially I guess in more progressive leaning states, you're going to see that similar laws are passed. That's my belief. And as that happens, companies are going to have to ask you for the permission to use your data, to sell your data, or to market to you. And I'm going to say one thing about the generation behind me. I love what they're doing with their data. They're finding ways to make corporations and brands pay them for their data, their information, their branding, these brand ambassadors. And I don't know, I haven't quite figured out how they do it. I have a couple of colleagues that do it, but I think it's amazing. So that's them taking ownership of their data and saying it's out there already. If anyone's gonna make money off of my my algorithm that I put into YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, or I'm gonna be the one making the money off of that. So I think so. I guess long story short, yes, I do believe that it's possible. I see it happening with CCPA. I don't know. I hope that it spreads. As a consumer, I hope that it spreads across. I'm in DC. I hope that it makes its way into other spaces. So.
Okay, so let me throw my rock at your balloon.
Please do.
Equifax, data breach.
Mm-hmm.
What did I see? I think the number was something like 30 million people were affected by that data breach. And don't quote me on that because I'm old and senile. So I don't remember what I said yesterday, so it might be a different number. But anyway, but it was a huge, massive number of people who were affected by that data breach, right? And so I want you to remember what you just said now about that CCPA and all that, right? So huge number of people affected by this data breach. First of all, none of us are customers of Equifax. We are customers of our financial institutions, but not Equifax, right? Equifax has our information. They have all of our information, our age, date of birth, social security number, whatever you want to name, they've got it. How much money we got in the bank, everything, where we live, they got all of that data.
That's right.
So with Equifax breach, what they did, which some people might consider generous, I did not, but what it is, they offered credit freezing. They would freeze your credit, so anytime you went to buy something, so they'd have to get your permission to do a credit check. They offered credit monitoring, and they offered a small subsidy for this data breach, right? How many people you think that look like you and I, look like our brown brothers and sisters, and our red brothers and sisters took advantage of that?
Not many.
Very, very small.
I would guess, but I'm going to throw a wrench in what you just said, though.
Okay.
Even with gaps in the data, if you were to freeze your data today, and I'm going to go back to, you said you're not on Facebook.
Thank God.
Facebook has the ability to build a model based on whatever information is out there that they can grab out there about you. LinkedIn, they can purchase data from LinkedIn, from Equifax, from all of these places, and they're able to fill in the blanks.
Right.
And they could say, you know what, we had to purchase 70% of this data, but Dr. Newton, this is her profile. And we do it every day. And so it's funny because my wife she's completely, as off the grid as she can be. But it's kind of like when you know something, you're almost thinking to yourself like, as much as you try to remove, there is the ability to fill in the blanks. Yeah. And but the good thing about with the Equifax, or I guess if you're able to remove your information from Equifax, I'd say most companies out today, they're buying information from companies like Equifax, or is it Dun and Bradstreet for businesses and whatnot. So I mean, so long story short, I'm with you on that, and I don't think that we took advantage of it. But
my point is that what you were describing of us being able to buy back our data, and I want, before I even go to say that, so Ancestry and those DNA companies, this is one of my favorite people to pick on because it's just amazing to me. So I'm going to send you my DNA. You're going to tell me whatever it is you're going to tell me, and if you're Black, and probably if you're brown, if you're red, I don't know about, Asians and other things, but at least those three groups. We are such a conglomerate of ethnicities, so, Black, brown, orange, yellow, green, we got so much in our lineage that we are not just this one thing, so, I was listening to the Tiger Woods thing. They did a story on Tiger Woods the other day, and some of the older Black golfers were mad because he identified for both sides of his family, his father and mother. But my DNA is now, and I'm an Ancestry.com customer, so they have my DNA. And so what are they going to do with my DNA once they've done what they want to do with me, right? So once they tell me that I'm of African descent and, all these other things they're going to tell me, what then happens to my, do they delete it? Do they trash it? No, they're not going to do that, because
Not at all.
some of my family, some of my family might be criminals, or some of my family might be related to very important people, or whatever it is. So they're going to collect that data and massage for as much as they can get out of it.
That's
So
right.
going back to your point, how is it that we are able to do this? One, when we don't know all the places our data is, right? So Equifax is a good example. We don't know where it is. Two, how are you going to do it? Because we don't know what data they really have, right? So they're not going to tell us, right? So you've seen Facebook has been like 3 or 4 lawsuits for privacy violations and all that stuff. And three, a little aside, there's no federal law or regulation to the right to privacy. You do not have a right to privacy. So, the police can't come and kick your door in, but every time you walk into Target or any store that captures your image and watch you as you're walking around, you're not legally have any legal repercussions against that. Like if you have children, your school says something, we're going to take a picture of your child. Well, Target didn't ask you, could they take a picture of your child? But the school must then go on record and say, we would like to take a picture of your child. And this is what the picture of your child will be used for. But Target didn't ask me that. So with all of that that's out there, how is it that we can actually gain or even manage our own person, your own self? So Between the World and Me by Tennessee Coates. Have you watched it?
I've read the book, and I'm working my way through the film.
But the point is, he's saying you don't even own your own body. You don't have the right to your own body. So to take that to another level, what part of my intellectual properties do I own? What part of my history, the jobs I've had, how much money I've made, cars I've driven, how many tickets I've gotten, what part of that do I get to own? And if so, what is the tool that will make that so?
You know what? I don't think that I think eventually we will not own it. And I was grabbing from my phone. There's a quote on basically, and I'm gonna see if I can find it quickly, but basically talking about the fact that the only thing that we own is it's inside of us, and it's once it leaves us, with DNA, once it leaves us, once we leave it somewhere, it's no longer with us. This is the quote here: "Everything beautiful is created and developed in blackness. Ideas are conceived in the womb of the mind. Keep them there in darkness until they're ready to be birthed." Absolutely. And I often think about that, because once we release that information, once we enter into a target, like you said, we're leaving those. And I think that, and to be honest with you, we're in a capitalist, country. Any way that a company can, draw value, and specifically for Black Americans, this country and the organizations within this country that are still here have been extracting wealth from our bodies for years. That's right. And I think that corporations have only shifted in the way in which they're extracting wealth.
Right.
Now
they've become more covert than overt, right? Before they didn't care what you thought about, but now they've become subtle in their attack.
That's right. Even think about the 45 has just signed the bill,
I don't,
and if you notice, that's right. So for me, 45 just signed that bill. If you notice one thing about it, stock prices go up because they know that money was put in your hands. But I have the data. I have models built that I understand that as soon as that money touches your account, if I own, Apple, I know that I'm going to sell more phones. If I own, here in DC, I think we have Cox. If I own Cox, and I know you're 3 months behind on your bill, if you want that cable to stay on, I'm going to get caught up this week because you're going to have $600 something in your account.
Right.
So they're going to find ways. I feel like corporations, no matter what laws we pass, they're going to continue to find ways to extract wealth out of our bodies. I mean, and that's but you pose an interesting question, and I mean, I don't have an answer for it. How do we stop it? I don't have an answer for
Let me just tell you a little small secret. I'm brilliant. Okay,
that.
that's that's my me, and I'm also magic. So that's how I come up with all this stuff. But in all seriousness,
It makes sense. Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about diversity. I know we're running out of time, but I think that this is such an important conversation. So I want you to come back and talk to me again, maybe sometime
I'd love
after
to.
January, come back and we're just going to talk about this. We're going to delve into this because I think it's so important. I am in the process of writing a book. And one of my points is, as I look at technology through the lens of gender, economics, and race, and current and emerging technologies, and how do they knock on top of each other each way, right? So another one of those wonderful things in your world. So cashierless societies, driverless cars, and whatever other kind of automation you can be. So robotic surgery, whatever it is you can think of, the people that are going to hurt from this the most, going back to Mr. Bucket and the Charlie and Chocolate Factory, the people that are low educated, low skilled, whatever it is we can attach to them, whatever negative attribute we can slap on them, are going to be on the outside of looking in. And so one of those areas is financial technology. It's one of the places I spend most of my time doing research is financial technology. And I'll say this, so I'm a baby boomer, and we are dying 8 a day if it helps you. So we're gonna be out the way for a long time. But nonetheless, but financial technology. So when blockchain first came out, everybody was kind of Bitcoin. That's not gonna really be a thing. And now I think Bitcoin is like $20,000 a share or something, some outrageous number or something like that. I don't know what the whole pieces and parts of it are. But in reality, these things are going to hit underserved communities really hard. They are going to be a bang, right? And so in the Black and brown communities and in the red communities too, there are those groups that are unbanked or underbanked. Unbanked means you have no relationship with the bank at all. Underbanked means you only have a minor relationship with the bank. And that's why there's check cashing societies, companies and stuff out there, because these people are robbing them blind, right?
Right.
You get paid, but if you get paid on, say, the 30th day of the month, your organization released that money on the 15th day of the month, but it's got to travel an entire federally regulated process to get to your bank and then for you to have access to it. And every step along the way, there's a fee attached to it. So that's why they charge you $100 in interest, and they only pay you a penny in savings, because
that's right.
So with all of these things out there that are poised to disrupt our life as we know it, regardless of our ethnicity, but more important for underserved and underrepresented communities. How do we get people who have not normally been in the space of technology into technology? And I want to say something about that. So young people, I hear all the time, young people are technologically brilliant. These people can barely do anything. They know how to create a Facebook account. They can do Boomerang, but let them get a virus. Let them have to write a piece of code. Let them have to go in and reinstall their OS because it crashed. They don't know how to do that. And to me, that's technology. Being able to create a social media account and being able to Snapchat and whatever, all the other, that's great. I'm glad for it. But these digital natives, as we call them, need to either figure out how to fully embrace technology so that they can help their grandparents, or in my case, my two digital natives can help their mother when my brain completely fries out and I can't think straight, because, and I'll just tell you something I learned a couple of years ago. Your digital identity must be left in a will. You must leave it in a will. So, if they don't know the code to get my phone, or they don't know how to get into my LinkedIn account, LinkedIn does not have to give them access to it. And they aren't going to give them access to it. So now I have to leave my digital image, a digital identity, to my children in my will, right? So how are you going to get all of that done? And how are you specifically, Mr. Reed, going to get all that done? And we don't care about what the rest of the world is going to do it. We just want to know how you're going to do it. Because I'm sure you're thinking about it.
You know what, and I don't have answers for those questions, but
But I know
I
you're
but I think
working on it.
I'm, you know what, it makes me think, and I you brought up some interesting points. One thing you talk about. I mean, try to go back to that. You talk about young folks and technology.
Yeah.
One thing that I've learned, and if you go back to the city of Detroit, the metropolitan area that I'm from,
Yeah.
you notice that there are a lot of data or coding camps or coding companies, like small companies that are they're teaching Black folks to code.
Mhm.
At first, I thought that was a great thing. So I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. The sneaky thing about that is today, coding is almost to the point, and it is, and I'd argue that you can actually write code that writes code.
Right.
So even those jobs that we're pushing, some of the folks that used to have good factory jobs back home in the Midwest, where I'm from, so we're pushing folks from, out of the factory into these coding camps to write code. Some of those jobs will be obsolete shortly down the road. So if you start looking further down the road, those jobs will be obsolete because we have folks that are writing code to replace those code writers.
Yeah.
And so to me, if I have a young person that reaches out to me and says, hey, I want to get into the space of I want to get into data analytics and data science, I push them towards not just writing the code, but thinking analytically. So you can't as I say that, I think about the fact that you might be able to replace that analytical thinking. But at this point, we're not to a place to where you can replace, I guess, the human element in most parts of data analytics. I say that understanding that they're writing code to replace
right
that.
now. I'll get ready to say Watson is already there. Watson is working on it.
That's right. That's right. And but one thing, I guess, even going back into the space in which you lead in, you still have to have, if you don't have diversity of thought in the room, when that code is being reviewed, then looking from a corporation's point of view, you might be missing out on consumer dollars.
Absolutely.
Looking from our point of view, as a consumer, you might be pushing junk into our neighborhoods and into our, inboxes, because there's not diversity of thought in that decision making. So I guess it goes back. I guess I'm going to come back to, that's, to me, that's the value in the work that you do. Helping, and I have a whole topic. I mean, a whole discussion about diversity and inclusion inside the organization. Personally, the way it's set up today, I don't trust it, because who is the when you hire internal data and internal diversity and inclusion, if I have the power to fire and hire you and promote you, and I'm the corporation as D&I, unless your moral compass is pointed correctly, you're going to do what is necessary to provide for your family. So if I tell you, hey, I need our D&I, I need you to spend these D&I numbers in order to to show us in a positive light, then that D&I representative, that D&I leader is in a tough space. They have to make a decision.
So that's the reason why I created my company. My company is so it has 6 prongs, but 4 of them that are most dear to me. 1, branding. Mm-hmm. You, the individual, must find out who you are and how to market it yourself to that company, or market yourself, or create your entrepreneurs and whatever you're going to do. 2, if you're hiring a diversity officer and if you got more than 50 employees, that person is going to be overwhelmed almost day one. Right?
That's right.
Secondly, if that person is not supported and backed fully by the leadership, both with money and actions and policies and practices, you're just wasting your time. 3, if the organization does not have a clear and articulated, broadly or widely known diversity practice and policies, another waste of time. And then 4, if you don't hire, so to use your statement, right? So I always recommend companies in hiring, and this is what I do in myself. I always recommend, if you have a senior job, so let's just say you're the chief data officer for an organization. You're in the top, in the C-suite level, you're part of the major decision making that goes on in the universe, in the universe. So you're there. So the people who interviewed you, seniors, 100 years worth of experience, been doing this for a long time, you know, there are all these things right here. But that isn't the people that should be in the room. It's not that they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be the only people in the world. So you should bring the person in the organization who has the least amount of experience, had just started doing this yesterday. You know, you should bring the person that works in the Department of Parts and Supplies. That person should be in there. You should have as much diversity in that room as you can get, because the people at the top, they forgot what they know now is almost like automatic. It just responds. So when they sit down in the room and they're hiring a chief diversity officer and they're sitting there, so they're looking for leadership. They're looking for their ability to think outside the box, to see the big picture and all those things like that. All that's great. Not a damn bit of that is going to get the damn job done at the end of the day. What you need to do is hire an employee who can work well, is collaborative, who believes in sharing knowledge, coming together, team building. And if he or she doesn't have, build their own team to get what they need to be successful. So I will just say, in the grand scheme of things, you are so dead on with that. I mean, just absolutely dead on, especially in a place where data manipulation, and I'm going to ask you a question. You might be too young to know this. Have you ever seen the movie War Games?
I'm sorry, City War.
You ever seen the movie War Games?
I have not.
Watch it. You've got to go watch it. I mean, it's probably $1 or something to watch it, but you got to watch it. War Games is a story of a little boy hacker. He hacks into his school's computers so he can change his grades. He's got like D's and F, and his parents can't see that. So he goes into the thing, he rewrites the code so he gets all straight A's on his report card, right? So, but being so curious as he is, he starts looking for other things to do. So he hacks higher and higher and higher and higher. Eventually, he hacks the Department of Defense. So he hacks into the Department of Defense. And he tells the computer that runs the Department of Defense that he wants to play thermonuclear war. Now, I don't know how that became a game, but he wanted to play it. So you've got all these brilliant people who run the organization, the Department of Defense. You got all these power brokers. They have these connections to the president and all these things. This movie, I want to say it may have come out in the late 90s, but maybe even late 80s. I don't remember what it is, but it's not new at all. But what happens is he convinces the computer that the United States and Russia are at war. And he convinces the computer that Russia has launched its missiles at the United States. Wow. And of course, the data the computer puts out goes to the head of the person who's running this thing. And he then thinks that they have launched their data. So now they have to have a counteraction, right? So they're the United States and Russia releasing their missiles. And this computer is planning to release these, and it's trying to get the code. So whatever that code is that says you can launch missiles, it's trying to get all the codes to start the launch, right? So at the very end of the movie, it gets all but one code. So I think it was 9 or 11 codes. It gets all but one. Yeah. And so the person who had originally wrote the code for the Department of Defense is an old guy who they killed off theoretically. He's still alive, but they put him out someplace in the boonies where no one would ever find him. So he's just out there and nobody, but he's still alive. Well, this little hacking young fella, he figures out who he is and where he is. Because now this game he started is turned into real war. It's like the world could disappear, right? So he tracks down this guy. He convinces him to come to the Department of Defense, because the Department of Defense is looking for this little boy now because they want to arrest him and put the jail on top of him. So he's not little, he's a young man, I mean, like a teenager, so that, so he convinces this guy to come back to the Department of Defense. They go into the war room where this thing is, it's about every 10 minutes, it's getting a code. It's getting one of the numbers or codes to launch the missiles. And so what they try to do is they try to get the computer to play another game, so instead of playing thermonuclear war, let's play chess, or, they coming up with all these different things, but the computer was ignoring them. It's just going about it. It's put them out, and there was nothing they can do, the leaders and the people who work in this, to change it. And so the young boy says, no, the old man says to the young boy, the one that they had, theoretically killed, he says, have it play checkers. Now, think about checkers. I'm sure you played it when you were younger. what's the story behind checkers? If you're really good, what's the story behind checkers? You can never win because no matter whether you put your red circle in the middle or the side or the top, if your opponent is equally as smart as you are, it's always a draw. And that's exactly how they kept the computer from launching the missiles and going to war, because the computer thought that Russia had launched theirs. Russia had not, but it was sensing that from this game it was playing that that's what happened, and it was preparing to release the missiles. And so it's the example that you said in such a beautiful way, right? There are things developing code beyond what we did. So the guy who created this machine, who was managing the war and all that stuff and had all these things, it had taken over and eliminated people altogether. It just none of you matter. I now am thinking for myself, and I am going to do this thing. So I can't wait till we have our next chat. This has been thrilling. I mean, this has been the most excited I've been in a long time. This is thrilling. We got to do this again. You got to promise you're going to come back and do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. I enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to digging deeper into, diversity in the space, and absolutely appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Yeah.
Absolutely. I am too. And I'm sorry we took so much time. I did not mean for this to happen, but you're such an interesting man, and your views and your the seat at the table you have is very, very important to me, because I think that what I really want us to do as we continue to have these conversations is figure out how to reach out to these communities who are resistant to technology, afraid of technology, unfamiliar with technology, and to understand what's at risk here. What are we at risk for? Because we've lost so much, and yet still we're not in the 1% or whatever the 1% is. We're still in the trenches. We still haven't gotten our 40 acres and a mule. We're still struggling to find our way, and yet still we're at the mercy of people who don't even recognize us for what we are, because we haven't talked about Mr. Floyd. We haven't talked about, how we are seen in America. And I'm sure you saw that when the Central Park 5 were released, how we're seen, right? So how are we seen? And I mean, like in my instance, I'm an angry, emotional, unstable Black woman. That's exactly who I am. So, let's get, and I'm passive aggressive too. Let's not leave that out. So you've got all of these things that are associated with who I am, whether they're true or not. Somebody believes them to be true. So
that's right.
I can't wait to do this again. I'm going to send you a link to watch this after we're done. And if you don't think we've done a good job, we can do it over again, because I just love everything about this chat. It's been thrilling to me. So thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me.
Dr. Newton, thank you so much for taking the time. I just want to leave one thought. The thing that if I could
Please.
leave one last thought. The thing that I've been listening to Karen Hunter and Dr. Greg Carr out of Howard University. One thing that they often ask in their conversations: how does it free us?
Yes.
And then I combine that with a rapper. I'll leave his stage name off, but Michael, I can't think of his last name, but he goes by Killer Mike. I'm going to use a different word, but how do we remove our masters? How do we remove those things that chain us, be they our jobs? And that's the thing that I advise young folk that I'm talking to in this space. If you can find a way to consult, if you can find someone that will pay you outside of corporate America for what you do, you don't have to lead it all at the same time, but find a way to consult on the side so that you can free yourself.
Yes.
So that I'll leave it there.
Well, so when I end the recording, don't hang up with me yet. Just stay on once I end the recording. But I'll say one thing to you about that. So I don't know if you know who Charlie Nelms is. He was the chancellor at North Carolina Central, historically Black College. He said that the day that we are waiting for, we are us. We are them. There's nobody coming. The cavalry is not coming to save Black people. It's not coming to save brown people. We must find a way to save ourselves. And what you said about, how do you free yourself from your master? That's right on point. And then I'll leave you this one thought that I want you to think about, for our next chat.
Yes, please.
In our work, how many racist terms exist in IT? Master slave, blacklist, blacklisted,
Mm.
whitelisted,
Mm.
manpower. You know, I mean, and there are just tons of. I mean, I could rattle them off for hours. But the language that
That's
is
right.
in our work, that is in IT, and we are so comfortable with it. Even as Black people, we aren't bothered by it. Master,
That's right.
slave. What?
Yeah.
I'm going to slave this server to this other thing, or I'm going to slave this storage. What? You know, so okay, that's on your agenda for next time.
Absolutely.
I might have a heart attack if I keep talking to you anymore. I'm get too excited. Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm going to turn the recording off, but thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now don't hang up on me. Hold on.
I will not.